Straight from the band. This is Straight from the band. Test. 1, 2. Straight from the band. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Straight from the Ben. In today's episode, we are talking with two individuals about transgenderism. We are talking with Jase Gaudet. Some of you might have listened to our podcast with his parents, Sharon and Mark. Jase talks to us about his journey as a transgender man and his ongoing support of young people in the transgender community. We also talk with France Breault. France is a social worker in the school system, and she talks to us about her role in helping youth who are discovering their gender identity. Together, they help shed some light on the topics of transgender and gender identity, in the hopes of moving towards a more inclusive society. So, anyways, I hope you enjoy, and here we go. This is our podcast with Jase and France. Testing 1 2.
2, 5, 7.
Test.
2, 5, 7.
Welcome
1,
to Straight from the Band.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Probably the most average podcast ever. In 3, 2, 1. Al,
Fern, how are you?
I'm good. You?
Pretty good.
We're playing with one mic there today. You know why? Because we have two guests.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't often have two guests, so
You need to give me the mic when I'm talking.
it's all right. People will understand.
Yes.
Okay. So, you go ahead. I want you to, because it's kind of because of you that we have this special invite.
I could break into a song. All right. So listen, let's get to business. So really excited to be here with you, Fern, as always, and Denis, our tech support. Hey, Denis. We have two very special guests tonight. I'm very excited to have these two guests with us. One of them I've known for 20 years. No, not 20 years. Well, almost. It started in daycare. So
And the other I've known for, God.
Let's just not
Let's
say.
let's not date ourselves, but very long. Very long.
all right. So we're with old friends. Yeah. All right. And their names, let's say their name, Jase and France. So good evening, folks.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us tonight. And let's just start with little storytelling. So let's start with Jase. Jase, not tell us why you're here. Tell us your story, because we're keeping the suspense for our many listeners out there. So Jase, tell us a bit your story and where you are now. And let's start with your age, and let's go back to from the beginning.
All right, so I'm 19, and so I'm in school right now because that's what 19-year-olds tend to do. So my story, it's pretty interesting, pretty unique. So when I was born, I was a girl, and I grew up I was an only child, and so that was pretty fun. I was spoiled. And but there was always something a little bit different about me. I never really enjoyed like the stereotypical girl things. You would rarely see me in a dress or anything pink. I kind of tended to stay away from that. My friends were guys and a girl who was like a tomboy like me. And growing up, that was pretty much it. I didn't really put too much focus on gender. And then, middle school hit, and that's when, you start dating things and questioning yourself, and everybody's awkward, and, that awkward stage. So at that moment, I realized there was something a little bit different about me compared to my other friends that were girls. I didn't like guys. I was like, not really my type. So at first I thought I was gay, and I went with that for a bit. I told my parents. They were fine with it. And then after that, I realized there was still something missing. Like, saying that I was gay made it so that I could explore my gender expression. And
How old were you, Jace, when you were coming to those realization? Maybe I'm gay. I'm not sure I like boys.
I was about in grade 8. I'm not sure what age that is,
Okay.
but about in grade 8. And that's when I actually had my first crush on a girl in grade 8, and I was like, oh, what is this? But yeah, so and then I started to like dress a little bit like more masculine in like the end of grade 9, and that's when I felt more comfortable. And there was still something that wasn't like full yet. Like I was still like missing something, and I didn't know what because like how do you know? Um, so in grade at the end of grade like 10, just before summer, I was in French class. It was March 17th, and I texted my mom. I was like, I want to get my hair cut today. And she was like, it's Friday. It's like 4 o'clock. Like, where are you going to go get your haircut? We can only go to Magic Cuts. So I was like, yeah, we're doing it today. Like, I was like, it's either today or I don't do it ever. So we went, and like the good mom she was, she brought me there. And that was actually the moment that I realized that I was Jase and I was a boy. I was not a girl. When the little lady took that cape off when you get your haircut, you know, you wear a little cape. I seen myself. I was wearing a little like plaid button up, and I seen Jace in the mirror, and I was like, I'm gonna do everything from this moment on for other people to see me as who I am, who I feel, and who I am. So that's what I did, and it was actually really my journey was really smooth. Other people's journeys are not as smooth as mine. I had accepting parents, and a really good school too that accepted me. So that's I was really grateful and thankful to have that. So yeah, that's my story.
Yeah, we had the honor of having a podcast with your parents as well, and yeah, I mean, I'll just echo what you just said. You were lucky to have those parents because I mean, you often see kind of the flip side where it's not as accepting, and but yeah, they were awesome. They were very much sharing and shared the whole haircut story. It was awesome. I mean, that was really good. So, France, now you tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, I won't start at birth. That's way too far.
Thank you.
I guess if we're talking about gender identity, I'll talk more about my job because that's when I first learned about all the LGBTQ plus communities and all that kind of stuff. So I guess I'm a social worker by trade. So when I first had, I think it was my first job or my second job or something like that. It was a project with Safe Spaces, and a project. It was a pilot project at a different sites in Canada. Were trying to put in place some services for LGBTQ kids. And in Moncton, there was a site in Moncton, so that's when I started my journey in diversity and all that kind of stuff. So I worked there for about 4 years, then went on to do other things, and came back to work in the school settings. And I've been working in the school settings for, I don't know, 15, maybe more. And then that's when. There's three guys actually came to me and said, we want to start a group, a support group. It was three gay guys, and I said, okay. In the Anglophone district, they called it a Gay Straight Alliance at that time. That was like 12 years ago. And so we started a group and an alliance, and from there it just grew. And I was meeting all kinds of kids with that were struggling because their parents were not accepting, mostly, or maybe their environment and all that kind of stuff. So, and eventually the group became bigger, and we did all kinds of stuff at the school that I was working at, and then that's when I met Jase in grade 9, actually. And our story starts from there.
Little sidebar. I was France's roommate way back when she started working
Yeah.
at Safe Spaces. Kept wanting her to bring work home, but she never did. So, But
I remember that day when I got the job. You were home at the apartment, and you were the first one that I told that I
Yeah.
got the job.
And I was a very talkative person, as you know, as most people know me as, right? No,
Not.
no, but I was a very good listener. So
That's
she
for
came
sure.
to me, and it
Yeah.
was really good. It was
Yeah.
a moment.
A moment, a
We had
very
a moment.
special moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Good.
All right, I want to get back to Jase for a minute. So, as we discussed when we met your parents, so for everybody who did not listen to that podcast, I seriously suggest that you listen to that podcast. Um, uh, Jace was in school or started in daycare with my oldest son, so that's when I met Jace a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
And so for elementary school, our kids were in one class. There was only one class per grade, so they followed each other all the time. And so I got to know Jace's parents quite well too, because we had many birthday parties together, either Jace's birthday party or my kid's birthday party.
At least once a year.
And,
for the
and at
birthday.
least once a year for 4 or 5 people. Got a little expensive. But anyways, it's all done now. So it's really good to see you. I haven't seen Jason forever. I saw a bit of him at the graduation.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. So here's the question that I've always had. And I forgot to ask your parents, and I wanted to ask your parents, but it's more your business than theirs. How did you pick the new name Jase?
Well, that's actually a fun story. Everybody's different because, like, how do you choose your own name? Like, nobody does that except for people, who need to change their name. So, for me, my experience was that I kind of, like, I asked my mom and dad what they would have called me if I was born a guy, and they told me they didn't have a name. That they're lucky that I was born in the gender I was, because if not, I wouldn't have a name. So that didn't help me, because I was like, I'll just pick whatever name they were gonna pick. But then I resorted to online, and I didn't want anything too like complicated, and I also didn't want something that I knew somebody who had that name, because I didn't want it to be like, oh, like that's awkward. So I had a few names. I think I had 3. I don't remember what they were, but anyway, I asked my friend, and she was like my friend, but like we weren't super close, so it I don't know, it went well, and she told me I looked more like a Jace, so I was like, I picked Jace. It was just that.
Excellent. And the conversation we've had with your parents, well, before we did the podcast with your parents, and again tonight with you, I had one question for both your parents and you, and was, is there any rule? Is there any question we cannot ask? And you said the same thing as your parent. We don't want to talk about the birth name. Tell us why.
Just because it's not like I love that name. It's just it just holds a spot that it reminds me of like before, and how uncomfortable I felt then, and how like it's not a good thing to remember about. I feel like the longer I've been transitioned and I've been being Jace, the less I feel attached to that name. So like now I can hear it and not be like, oh, that's me, or like somebody's misgendering me. It's less triggering, but still it reminds you of a time that you don't really want to think of.
So, France, like now, you kind of just briefly mentioned that how you guys got involved, but your relationship is more than that. Like, you guys work together in certain aspects, right? You have kind of projects together. You do presentations together sometimes, don't you?
Like quite often, actually. We I started. We started, but not working together. But I kind of working together at the school. I met Jace in grade 9, and we had some meetings, just the two of us, being a social worker. And later on, Jace was part of the Gay Straight Alliance at the school that we don't call Gay Straight Alliance anymore. It's not inclusive enough, so we call it, we give them a name or something like that so it's more inclusive. And Jace was actually for a year the president. So he helped other kids at the school and did some presentations then and all that kind of stuff. But when he graduated, Jace continued working with me, and I would call him quite often because I don't have a story like Jace. So when I meet with other kids or professionals, they want to hear about the stories, and they want to hear about how people can feel. And I can tell them all kinds of things, and I've learned a lot of stuff, but I don't have that story. So I always ask former students to come with me at presentations, and Jace is one of them, which, yeah.
Cool. Any, like for the listeners out there that have listened to our interview with Jace's parents, they mentioned at one point an awesome social worker that they yeah we tracked her down. We tracked her down, and it is France in exact. So it's funny that how because you have a link to Jason, I have a link to France, and it's just funny how it all kind of ended up all together. Yeah. So
I've actually met Jace's parents when he was in school, and that was uh, we had to talk about other things, but I remember the first time that his mother asked to change their name. So Jace had so what the education system is trying to do is to any barriers to get rid of any barriers for students that want to change their names or want to be themselves. So his mom called or sent me an email. I was doing a presentation, and during the break, I looked at my emails, and I got this email from your mom, Jace, and I remember it said, "We want to call our son Jace, and we want to make all the changes that we need to." And that was quick and easy because I made sure at the school we had an open minded school, so we could all do the changes very easily. All the schools in New Brunswick are supposed to be are able to do that, and that's when I learned about Jace identity.
I just want to mention too that the summer before I transitioned, I had came like in school. I talked to her about thinking that I was trans, and then she gets this email like before school starts in September saying, "Oh yeah, this is Jace. He is actually trans."
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool.
Yeah. And I remember the year before, he applied to be a leader at the school. So we have those students that are in grade 11 and 12, and they're usually leaders that will help the grade 9 get through the school, or their first year in high school. And I vouched for you. I wanted to make sure that Jace was one of the leaders because I knew he was a leader. And we had this training at the beginning of the year, and I got the email just before, so we changed every document that we needed to do at that training for Jace. So, and it went well.
So, Jace, where did you get the? So I hear that you got support from France and the school and friends, but before you got there, like teenage years it's an awkward time for everybody. How do we get from I feel awkward, I feel out of place, I'm not sure about things to I think I'm transgender? Did you do some research? Did you talk to a lot of people? Because from what I understand from you and your parents, you came to them with your not decisions, but your conclusions. It's not like you had tons of conversations with them. So those conversations did not necessarily take place at home. How did you come to, now this is more than just a teenager that is kind of awkward and, trying to find himself. How did that happen for you?
Well, honestly, the way that I even discovered like what transgender was, like in school when I was in school, they mentioned it, but it wasn't more than just like, oh, like here's LGBT, this is what the T means, It was basically just that, and I mean at the time they didn't realize how important it was to talk about transgender stuff in school. And there was nothing. You never seen a transgender person famous. No. So what I found was actually I was on YouTube, and I found this YouTuber named Chase Ross, and he does like YouTube stuff about like just transition stuff in general, like how tips on how to like pass as the gender that you want to present as, and just like stuff like that. And really, to me, that's what I was watching, and I really like was like, oh my gosh, this is me. Like this is how I feel. This is like he explains like what dysphoria is, and I don't know if my parents mentioned that, but that's like when you're it's like it's like an anxiety, but with your gender and how your body looks and stuff like that. And anyway, and just I could connect to that, and it just made me like, wow, like that was me.
Most of the kids actually look on YouTube for models, and that's a shame because there are a lot of people that they could talk to. And having Jace as a presenter, or when he comes to me at workshops and stuff like that, that helps. It's a real flesh and blood model. Like it's not on YouTube; it's a real person. So, well, on YouTube, this real person, but
We know what you mean.
yeah. But it's more. It touches the kids more. Hmm.
Yeah. And and again, I'm pleading ignorance too, and that's why it's so interesting to have you both here. But like it seems in the last maybe year, 2 years, that you've really there's a movement going on. It seems like about transgender, and it's I don't know if it's Kendall Jenner or that's it's Kendall Jenner. No, Jenner.
It's not Kendall.
Kendall? No.
No, no.
Oh no, that's his
it's,
daughter.
Ki-
Sorry.
It's the mom there, the like stepmom of the
Yes.
Kardashians. I'm not sure.
Anyways, we'll Denny
Caitlyn-
Caitlyn Jenner.
Caitlyn.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. So it seems like that really brought things to the front page. Last time with your parents, I said trendy, and I really didn't like that when I said that because I don't find that's appropriate. But the front page is more like it's really brought it to the surface. And you, what's your experience? I mean, you're both laughing, so I know you have something in mind. So where does this all kind of stem from?
Actually, that was one of the things that I was like, ooh, it's not trendy, and it hasn't been going on for the last year or so. But it's been there. It's been existing for a lifetime.
Oh, I know, like
It's
hundreds of
just,
years. I know.
Yeah, if you look at just Stonewall in 1969, the movement, the LGBT movement, has been started with transgendered women. So it's been there for years, but maybe the society wasn't ready to, to plunge into it. And maybe you hear more about it now because people are being themselves more, and we need to support them in all kinds of ways. They weren't being they weren't being part of the human rights legislations and all that kind of stuff. And they were really, a lot of those kids were, and I talk a lot about kids because those are the ones that I work with, but they were suffering and people weren't talking about it enough. So, I mean, that's been a long time coming. And if you hear about it more lately is because it's important for us to talk about it. And I can't talk about it enough for people to understand that it's always been there. It's just that people were not listening. That's my point of view.
So, France, when someone comes to you, like Jace did at that time, and I assume some people come to you at different stages of their reflection. How do you receive them? What is your first instinct or your first task with them when someone comes to you and says, you know what, I'm confused, I don't know, I think. What's your first?
Well, I'm so proud of them. That's the first thing that comes to mind is I'm proud because that means that they're listening to themselves, and maybe they're questioning because society has told them something, and now their mind, their body, their brains are telling them something else, and it's confusing. Society is confusing because society says this is the way you should be, and when you don't fit in this society, it becomes confusing for kids. So the first thing is, how do you feel? Because a social worker or a psychologist can't really tell a person if he's transgendered, gay, lesbian, or whatever. It's really the person that can tell you that. So my first focus will be, how do you feel? And in exactly what they're going through. So I'm a listener, even if I could talk more than Fern sometimes.
So okay, so we had talked a little bit about what we wanted because now we're going to get into more questioning because again we have questions and so let's put some definitions down on sex and gender. Like sex, if we're talking about sex, if I'm thinking science, I'm thinking there's two sexes, male, female, and intersex, right? So three genders.
Ooh.
Very good. And but gender. So gender is where we get into a spectrum. Okay? Is that what we're and again and I'm asking you as the experts because you I mean again you get a lot of different opinions and different feedback on a variety of different people. So I'm asking you as the experts, like what are we talking about? So we can agree on sex then is that correct? Is that
Have you guys ever seen the gender unicorn?
no. No.
I
Oh.
find
They've
that
been missing my presentation.
this is something you can just search on Google. Just put the gender unicorn. It's this here.
'Kay.
And if you see, it has a really, really clear, like visual differentiate. I don't know how to say that. Differentiate. Yeah, of the of where the gender identity is versus the sex assigned at birth. So it shows you that the sex assigned at birth is in between the legs, and the gender expression is the thought, which I also say like the gender of my brain. So that's kind of what you're trying to describe, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So then we are. I'm just wanting to make sure that we are when we're talking about sex and gender that we are kind of on the same page, right? So
But I would never want somebody to refer to me as being, oh, your sex is female. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
That's biology, and in biology, sex is not only the genitals; it's the chromosomes and all kinds of stuff that goes to in science mostly, and that was chosen by society or by people that decided that this is a girl, this is a man. So those are labels that were put on. So if you talk to a doctor or whatever, they'll say there's three sex. And but what Jase is telling you is that he's right. It doesn't matter what you were born with. It's the doctor that signed you just by looking at your external genitals. He didn't look at your chromosome. He didn't look at XX, XY. He didn't do any tests, and it certainly didn't ask you because probably you couldn't speak at that time. But so this is just a small part, of a person, but we put a lot of emphasis on that.
And there's also a lot of like genders as well. Like you typically see when somebody's like trans, what you see normally is there's like a trans male, which is like female to male, and there's a trans female, which is male to female. And then that's typically what you see like in public, but there's also non-binary people, and those people you tend to not see as much in public. And I might be confusing, like for people who don't know anything about this is very confusing, but it's very important to mention because those could either be somebody who identifies is like kind of like gender fluid, so they kind of like like their gender is fluid. And there's also people who identify with no gender. They're agender, if I'm not mistaken. And also like the titles, everybody has a different like way to describe themselves. It's up to the person. Like yeah, it's very personal, your gender identity.
Those are labels, and people will maybe give themselves a label, but we don't give other people the label. So it depends on how they perceive themselves and how they choose their labels. So I won't be, I know Jace is a trans male, but I know that because he told me, not because I decided that's the label I should give him. So that's important too, because for everybody, like Jace just said, the definition could be different for you have a label and it might be different for a certain person and different for another person.
So, Jace, where do you find yourself on that spectrum of gender, or how do you like to be referred to?
Me?
Yes.
Oh, I like my pronouns are he, him, and I like to be like referred to as like male,
Okay.
like Jace. I mean, I don't mind being called a trans male, but some people who are trans don't like that at all. Like they just want to be called a male. And
Well,
often,
at the end of the day, isn't that the ultimate goal, to just forget the trans part, and
but
or no, is that part of this story?
like some people they don't want to like remember, like they don't want other people to know they're trans. Most of the time those people are referred to as stealth, so that means that they will go in society and nobody will know that they're trans, and they won't tell anybody, and they'll just live their life as the gender that they are, like that they have transitioned to. Where me, on the other hand, I want to tell my story to people because it's important that people see transgender people, and that's what I like. Like, I mean, I'm not embarrassed of it. I'm not ashamed of it, and I have the support. So if somebody's rude to me, I don't know, at Walmart, I can go home to a safe spot. So I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah. So you're really more of an advocate, like for and to help. So I think that's why probably that you're willing to still carry that label, I guess. Because
Yeah.
to be honest, if I didn't know, there would be no.
Yeah.
I would never think
The beard
that.
helps. But no, like I'm not ashamed. Like I said, I'm not ashamed of it. And like some people, I forgot what I was gonna say. I'm sorry.
No, but I think that's where, and again, I'm more than, to me, be what you makes you happy. To me, that's kind of like what I've always thought, and if that makes you happy, then do that, right? But you see more and more people having trouble with these, like not many. And how can I say, like it's mainly like in the gender fluidity and that kind of stuff, where they're saying, oh well, you can identify as one thing one day and another thing the other day, and I think that's where they're, you're some of them are getting problems, or how can I,
People aren't taking them
issues.
seriously.
Yeah, not taking them seriously because um, I'll I'll briefly go into, because I have a background in personal training and sports and that kind of stuff, and a hot topic now is um, transgender men going into and competing. No, sorry, no, it would be transgender
Either
women.
way,
But
actually.
they're saying that men that has transitioned into women competing against women would have an unfair advantage. Okay, and that's, I think that's where it's creating a lot of buzz right now, because you'll see that, I know lately there's been a UFC woman that's been fighting against women, and sprinters that have been competing against, you know, against women, and they're saying it's an unfair advantage. What is your? I'd like to know your take on this.
I think it's all in the hormones. So like I believe, I mean, I'm not a hormone expert by any means, but I take hormones, so I know a little bit about it. And I think like me right now, if I was to compete against a girl, like if they were like, oh, like you're born a female, you can't compete against the guys, you have to compete against a girl, I'd be much more like stronger, because testosterone is a stronger hormone. They creates strength. And it wouldn't be fair for the woman who was born a woman who still has estrogen to be against me. And I think it's the same for trans women, because when they take estrogen, it lowers their testosterone and they become like more estrogenized. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, yeah.
But my friend, like one of my close friends who is a trans woman, she tells me the story a bunch of times where when she like started taking estrogen and it finally like kicked in like fully, she could not lift, you know, those water jugs that you put like on a water cooler. She could not lift that anymore, and she was like, what is happening to me? Like, it just, the hormones is what makes like,
Okay.
I think that's the biggest concern with the sports people, is like, oh, like their hormones aren't the same, like what's gonna
Yeah.
go.
And it's probably at what point that you transition as well. I mean, some, if they transition later, I mean, if they've already developed and gone through puberty and already developed as a man and then transition to a woman, I mean, they would probably already have a certain amount of strength and bone density and things that would give them maybe that advantage. But if you're transition early, I would assume that maybe that's kind of like what you're saying. It would probably.
this particular woman that I talked about, I think she transitioned in like the late 20s.
Oh, really?
So I don't think it's with age, but
Okay.
like it's the estrogen that kind of goes through, and it doesn't weaken you, but takes the testosterone away.
Right.
Like I don't know much about the professional sports, but I think that they can't really take hormones sometimes if they compete in a. So that makes it more difficult because you have, like I had a student that was playing soccer um, during high school, but when it became university, uh, if he wanted to be on a team, like he didn't felt that he was strong enough to be on the men's team, but if he stayed on the women's team, he couldn't take any hormones. But that's delaying his transition. So you either have to either not take hormones or not play. So we really, really have to look at it differently and find solutions because it's not helping those people that want to transition at this
A
one.
lot of people I know, they just end up like letting go of their sport.
Yeah.
They don't keep going.
Hmm.
I have a tough question. Jace, do you want kids at some point in your life?
Yes, I
Yes.
want kids.
Okay. So here's the question for both of you. You know, this is a big decision, right? What level of maturity should one have to be able to make that decision? So really, at the end of the day, my question is there an age at which we would say, too young, think about it for a couple more years? Like you knew, you didn't know, didn't have the words, but you knew early on. So when you have a child, that child comes to you, he or she is 8. You see, I went there. He or she is 8 or 9 or 10. And France, same for you. What is an age that is, or maybe there isn't? So, told you we were coming from a place of ignorance.
No, well, that's a really good question because we get asked that all the time. I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure France gets that all the time too. But honestly, as soon as that kid is old enough to be able to like tell you that they're trans or not, they won't use those words normally when they're younger. But you know, if it's a little like if it's a kid who's born a male and then the kid's like, "Hey, mom, like, no, I'm a girl." Typically, then they're telling like you should listen to that kid because a kid's not just gonna make that up. Normally, also young ages don't see it as often. So if they're feeling that, they're actually feeling that way. And it's also not like I find personally I would take like a little kid more seriously because they don't know gender at that point. They just know that they're not in the right, like you're not calling them the right name, you're not calling them the right pronouns. And that's why it's very important to educate them in schools too, because then they're not like me and only learn later what transgender is. I truly feel if I would have like learned earlier, I probably would have been able to like put like my finger on it. So yeah, and it's also more beneficial for a person to transition at a younger age because if you don't hit puberty, there's less things that need to be like reversed.
Although, like, I'll just play devil's advocate there. I mean, there is quite a bit of resistance against that, isn't there? Like, you'll get people on the other side of the table kind of saying, no, you have to be careful because kids can come up with the wildest things and whatever. And once you start, there's no going back to a certain extent, right? It's very difficult you can't just.
Those people need to be educated.
Okay.
Because that's pretty direct. But no, because like it's just like, would you like to?
That's okay. You're doing good.
Because like, yes, a kid may seem young, but like, there's just I don't know. It's just like.
Well, it's not like I'm always confused when people say it's such a big decision because the doctor made such a big decision at birth. That's how I see it. And they decided that I was a girl. And you know what? I've always felt like a girl. And at age 3, I felt like a girl. And nobody questioned it. Like if I said to my parents I'm a girl or wanted to play with dolls or wearing a dress, nobody questioned it. So why would it be such a big decision for a kid to say I feel like a boy or I'm a boy, but that's what they're going to say. They're not exactly going to say transgender. They're not going to say specific words that we use tonight, but they'll say exactly how they feel. And if society wasn't as wasn't dividing gender all the time with toys, with clothing, with color. Let's say we would just leave the kids do whatever they want to do and without any stereotypes. There wouldn't be a question who's a boy, who's a girl. Because until puberty, there's nothing else that the kid, there's no danger, like you say, like there's no risk at that point because they're just being themselves. And if a person that was assigned boy at birth wants to wear a dress, nobody would judge them. Nobody would say anything. And if he called himself a boy or a girl or whatever, it wouldn't matter. But until, like, we don't start hormone blockers before maybe age 10, 11 about. So until then, we just let them be. So, and I've met a lot of parents, and I get those phone calls at least 5, 6 times a year for parents that are concerned about their kid. Until kindergarten, they'll let them be, they'll let them play whatever they want to play. But once they get to in school, they're afraid that they're going to be bullied. And in kindergarten, you had kids. You both had kids. And they're not judgmental. They'll be accepting of all. And that's the best time for us to teach them about stereotypes and that there's not a color for a boy or a girl. There's not a certain way to dress. And I think that if we can teach our kids that, they'll be able to express themselves and know themselves better. And research will say that everybody can tell their identity between the age of 18 months and 3-year-old. They're not going to say anything. They're not going to talk about it because usually we don't tell them not what to do, or we let them be. But research will say that. And between age 3 and 7, there'll be créativité de genre. I don't know, gender creativity. I don't know.
Creative, yeah.
Yeah. So kids might try all kinds of things and maybe say things. But at 7, if they're still talking about their being a boy or a girl, it's really that means that it's their gender identity.
Okay. Now my stupidity is kicking in again.
It's not stupid.
No, but I'm thinking, okay, because you mentioned a few times about the doctor's assigning. So the doctor is assigning gender, not sex. Is that what you're saying?
Well, because people talk about sex and gender all together.
Because
People don't make the difference. Even on forms, you'll see sex.
right.
You'll see, yeah. But I've never seen I've never seen the word gender on a form. I've seen sex, F, M, and sometimes non-binary, but I've never seen gender, F, M, and non-binary. Maybe there is, but I've rarely seen that. So people are still putting sex and gender all together. And for some people, sex and gender is the same. For other people, it's not.
It's not. Okay, but just to get this clear, if you're born XX and you're a female and you have the genitalia as a female, you're assigned female.
By the doctor, yeah.
But isn't it? That's what
biologically you're assigned, but not with chromosome and all that kind of stuff. Just with
what's in between your legs.
Yeah,
right.
What they see.
Yeah, they look at your private parts.
But if you have a penis, you have XY chromosome.
Not well. Yeah, the doctor doesn't check that
But
at
isn't
birth.
it? But that's science, right? Isn't
Well,
that always the
if
case?
you look at intersex, if you look more into
Mm-hmm.
intersex, sometimes it can be confusing. Well, not confusing, but it can be. You can have like, let's say, a testicle and an ovaire,
Ovaries.
ovaries. So you can have both.
Right. Yeah. But there, when we're talking about intersex, we're talking about point one point something percent of the population.
One in 1,000
Yeah.
about. Mhm.
So, okay. But I'm just trying to make sure that I understand. Like, so you're saying that when that the doctor assigns, basically he's seeing
It's just that the
genitalia and-
doctor, when he assigns the sex, everybody includes the gender within.
Mhm.
So
He doesn't know what's in the brain. Is basically
No,
what you're saying.
exactly.
Right.
And sometimes it's the same, and sometimes it's,
It's
not.
not. Okay.
So the doctor is it's just because society will put both together. That's why I always say that's what he assigned. Well, it worked for me because I was born biologically a girl, and as well, I feel like a girl. So the assign that I got at that point was it worked for me, but it doesn't work for everybody.
It didn't work for me.
We talked about hormones earlier, and we talked about hormone blockers. Should we understand from that that it's probably easier for a human being to discover their true identity earlier on than at 30 or 40 years old? Biologically and also, I guess, emotionally, because I guess you've gone through more pain and suffering if you've been in the wrong identity or the wrong body for 30, 40 years.
From just talking to people, because I'm not that age yet, but from just talking to people like who have transitioned from an older age, most of them have known at a younger age. Like they did not say I am trans. They didn't click in their brain, but they knew that there was something. Like I mentioned in my story, I knew that there was something there. They know that there's something different about them, but they normally they would try to suppress that feeling because they don't know what it was, or they knew that it wasn't okay. Like for society, society was like, that's not okay. So most of the time they knew, they just didn't, like for people who transitioned at a later age, they just didn't do any action on it because they didn't feel like they were safe to do so.
So for you, Jase, let's go back to your story for a minute. Was it a one moment in time, and I'm thinking of the haircut, was there a moment where it was a weight lifted off your shoulder, or was it a period of time where you were going through those decisions and say, okay, yes, this is where I'm going, etc.? Or was it really, whew, I told mom and dad, people at school know, and today, like really literally waking up the next morning and go, yeah, finally.
So being trans is pretty much a battle every day. It's not so much a battle, but it's there's different challenges. It depends also because I do have dysphoria. Not all trans people have dysphoria, but I do. And some days it's worse than others. So like sometimes going to the bathroom it'll be hard, like in a public washroom, of course, because I'm like, oh, like maybe somebody knows. And then other days I'm like, who cares? Like I'm fine. So the moment that I had that weight lifted off my shoulders was when I told somebody. I'm really impulsive, so like as soon as I knew and I was ready, I told my parents, which was like within a few days of it, because I wanted people to call me Jase. I was not gonna wait another. I was 15. I was not gonna wait another 15 years, or even another year. But no, every day there's still like some stuff. Not every day anymore, because the more I move forward with my transition, the easier it is. But before I had top surgery, like my chest surgery, that was hard because every day you see something that's not like that doesn't look right. But yeah, sorry, that was confusing. I confused myself in that story.
So where are you on your transition, if you don't mind me asking, and what's the next step for you?
Yeah, so I'm open about talking about it, but some people aren't. Just that disclaimer. But you can ask me literally anything, and I'll answer it. With me, so I I started hormones when I was 16. 16. So a year after, it took me literally a year to get my hands on hormones. That was a little bit too long, but it was okay. So I took hormones.
Why did it take so long?
Just the
system?
Yeah. Some people get it faster now. It's a little bit quicker, but I was also young. And it's harder when you're under 18 to get anything with the New Brunswick health system. But so yeah, I got it at 16, so it took a year. And then after that, when I just turned 19, I got my top surgery, which was the best thing ever. Like hormones was awesome, but it takes longer to get the effect. Where top surgery, you literally wake up after like a 3-hour nap and you're like chestless. Um, so actually, I put it on caption. I'm glad to finally get that off my chest. The picture.
Love that. That's a good one.
But no, so that was probably the best thing. In regards to bottom surgery, which would be like bottom surgery, you guys can know what that is. I don't.
We figured that.
Personally, I don't want it right now because it's too complicated. It takes a lot. The last time I did my research, which was like a few months ago, it was to get a fully functional bottom like piece. You need to have 4 surgeries, like 4 different surgeries, and that's a lot of surgeries. It's hard on the like for a man's bottom surgery is much more difficult than a woman's bottom surgery. A woman, like you're in and you're done, like it's real quick. Where like it's much more hard on your body. They take skin from different places, and then you lose function in your arm. It's very inconvenient and it's ugly. So for now, I'm fine. There's also really awesome products that exist that are basically prosthetics, and they help alleviate bottom dysphoria, which is dysphoria related in the bottom area, and stuff like that for people who live with that. But yeah.
Bottom surgery is the recovery is very long, and you can't work for many months. So it's not exactly an easy surgery. I've got some training on the surgeries and all that kind of stuff. So not everybody want to and can get access to. And maybe Jase, you can correct me, but I don't think they do bottom surgery in New Brunswick. So you have to go outside the province, and plus they don't pay for the trip or the stay when you go over there. So there's a lot of cost that comes with that. So it's not exactly accessible if you want. And you mentioned something about the questions that you don't ask people, and Jase, but I just want to make sure that you don't ask that to a person. If are you going to get surgery, or Jase, in this setting it's fine because we're open to questions and all that kind of stuff, but usually you don't ask that question. And I've seen Jase not answer sometimes with in some schools said, this is not a question that you ask, and that's okay. Thank you for asking, but you don't ask that question because it's very personal and it's very different for everybody. And some won't even go to a top surgery at all, or so it's very different. Some won't use hormones either. So it's very, very personal to each and everyone.
I like to say when you come out as transgender, there's no handbook on what you need to follow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some people they'll take hormones and not get surgery. Some people will get surgeries and not hormones. Some people will get all of it. It depends on the person's wants and needs.
Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing for the expression. So what you see outside, you talked about, I couldn't tell when I saw you, Jase, but some people, it's dependent on how they want to express themselves, and that's a different part of the unicorn that we talked about. So expression is not the identity, and it's not because you're a man that you want to wear a tie, let's say. It's not because you're a woman that you're going to wear a dress. It's just, it's how you express yourself.
This is why we do this, because there's no handbook for the rest of society as well, who are not exposed to this reality, right? So so this is really good and interesting, and I'm thinking a lot of people listening, well, 35 of them, are learning something tonight or whenever they're listening to this. I have a question about the, it's really a ridiculous question, but I'm just curious. LGBTQ. Q stands for.
Queer.
Isn't that
And-
derogatory?
No, but yes,
yes.
It depends on how you use it. So I would never go up to somebody and be like, "Are you queer?" Like it literally, like or call somebody queer. Like I mean, you should never ask somebody what their sexual orientation or their gender expression is. But like or assume it. But queer is actually something that is very like I've asked a few people who identify as queer what it is, and every one of those people have a different like way of interpreting it, and I find it really interesting. And every time I learn that somebody's queer, I like if I'm comfortable with them, I'll ask them what it means, because it's like a personalized. It's kind of like a label for people who don't want a label, which I find kind of funny. But it's not. They use it like in different ways. Like it's not like a guy is gonna be queer. Like I don't know how to explain that. Sorry, that's confusing as well.
It's kind of a umbrella term, so it can be you can call yourself queer, but you mean that you're attracted to same sex or both or all genders. It can also be that you can call yourself queer and it's because you express yourself differently, or it can be so queer is really like a umbrella term. It's very large, and you're right. It still is. Some people still use it as an insult. So that is you have to be careful. But you don't call someone when you meet someone, oh, he's gay, or that's gay. That's the gay guy. Or you shouldn't be using those labels as to identify somebody. You know, when I see Jase, I call him Jase. You know, I don't. Oh, you trans. You know, so those
nickname.
those labels are for the person to be able to identify themselves better, but it's not necessarily for everybody else to use when you talk about that person.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because the other day we had a conversation when we knew we were going to sit down with both of you, and I guess the end goal is that we all live together and that everybody's happy, right? But then my question is, why do we focus on labels? Like, why do we need to focus on labels? If we can just be who we are, why all this? Because it seems like we all have this. They all have the same goal. Everybody has the same goal, but it seems like we still want our little niche or our little place where we kind of identify with. So talk a little bit about that, I guess.
Well, I'm going to be my speech with the society again, but we need labels. We're always looking for labels. Going to a store, you want to buy a shirt, you look for the label, the price. Is it on sale? What's the size? We're always using labels to understand stuff. So people will put some labels, and for some kids, it's very important to have a label. So at least they're trying to understand themselves, and finally, I know what I am, or I know, who I am. And people will need some labels, but some people don't. So we have to respect that. But at the same time, we're a society that needs label in every way. It's the same thing for mental health. It's the same thing for any diagnostic that you need some services, you need a diagnostic and all that kind of stuff. It's everywhere. So it's just not only when we talk about sexual diversity, but in every way. So, but it's not, it depends on the person, really.
Jase, would you like to be anonymous? That's in your life, or is it important to tell your story, or to be able to say I'm a trans male, or would you prefer just being anonymous? Or do you see that in 20 years it'll be no longer an issue? And
Well, I mean, I want people to know like that transgender exists, and if every trans person just decides to like not talk about it, and like you said, when you see me, you don't think I'm trans. So if I didn't talk about it, nobody would know I existed. So if every trans person is like that, like once they reach a certain point in their transition, then nobody's gonna really know trans exists. And like that's like we're in a point in society right now that people need to know that trans exists and that we are here and that you need to give us like the same respect that you would give a cis person, a person who's born as the right gender, as their gender that they identify as. So it's very important that like like that to me I want to stay like I don't know, sorry. I want to stay present and people see like that hear my story and that hear that it's normal and it's okay and that there's more than just me and then there's more than just the person who's feeling this way as well.
What's your biggest frustration right now in society, whether it's personal for you or for the trans community?
Oh my god, the biggest there's so many. There's so many little things that just make it so big. My biggest one probably is to find a bathroom. Like like right now in my life, that's my biggest issue is finding a bathroom. Like I will go in the men's washroom, but you walk in there and there's just one toilet. All the rest are urinals. Like, how am I supposed to pee in a urinal? You want me to squat? Like, I, sorry. Like, yes, there's devices that a trans person can use, but it's just like, and also when you go into the bathroom, that like there is a toilet, but normally there's like pee all over it, or there's like a nice poop stain, or it's warm, or sorry. It's just it's true though. Like like it's not things you think about, but that's what happens. And also something that I find really really hard in our area, like in New Brunswick, is just healthcare, like for a trans person. Like, do you guys know where to find it? I barely know where to find it. Like it's so hard. And when you go to even your family doctor, who you think would have the answers, knows nothing. My family doctor is asking me questions, and I'm 19. Like that's not how it works, right? I'm your patient. I'm supposed to ask you questions. So healthcare is a big issue. Like to get hormones, I like in Moncton right now, I don't even know who you'd go see. And because the one I went to is not taking patients because there's so many. And the closest place would be like St. John, I think, or Fredericton. I don't know which one's closer. But yeah, like it's so inaccessible for people who are trying to transition like medically. And just if you're not trying to transition and you have an emergency and you're going to the hospital for like I don't know something's wrong, they don't even know what to do with you because they're like oh, like this is a trans person, what do we do? Like it's just as soon as they see trans, they don't know what to do.
They're scared. I think they think that it's something so different. Like family doctors should be able to accompany those kids. And that's my biggest frustration as a social worker is the health system because I don't know where to send them. I have little names or just a few and just like Jay said, it's we can't find help for those kids when it comes to hormones or any kind. Mental health is working on it. It's getting better, but there still needs some work to be done within the system. Yeah.
Just to highlight, I Googled it a few minutes ago because I didn't remember, but only in October it became like covered in June, but it only became like in the fall were we able to receive our gender confirming surgery here in New Brunswick. Like, was it covered? And even at that, it's not fully covered. You still have to.
You
give
were in
money.
grade 12 then.
Yeah, I was in grade
Yeah.
12 when it became. So in 2017, did they cover it? And
You ran
we
to
were,
my office. I remember you ran in my office. You were talking to your mom. And it's your mom that told you that it became covered, and you guys were so happy about that. But there was
if
few
I'm not
glitches.
mistaken, we were actually the last province in Canada to get it covered, which is a little bit late, but it's okay. It's covered, but it's still not fully covered.
Fully covered. Yeah.
So, just to me, Mr. Positivity here, we've made progress, haven't we? Like it seems like we're hearing more about it, and it seems most people seem to be more accepting of it. So, in your opinion, like, do you think we're making progress, or are we? I mean, obviously, we still have a ways to go, but what do you think? Do you think we've made progress so far?
Yes, but yes, we've made progress to answer your question, but there's still so much stuff to go. If you ever take the time, like, to read comments on the reports, not all of them, like the small reports of like the trans people on I'm talking about the news. So like if you read the comments on like the stuff, sometimes it's scary. Um like reading I try not to read that stuff because it makes me scared to go out like to go out. It's people aren't accepting of it. Like people are, but then some people really aren't accepting of it. And Trans Day of Remembrance is November 20th, and even now, like I'm starting to do research on it, like for this one coming, and so many trans people die from being killed from people who aren't accepting of it. Even this, like in 2019, people are killed for
Wow.
being trans, which is not acceptable. And yes, we've made progress, but people should not be killed for being trans.
And that's not talking about the suicide
Yeah.
that a lot of people find that's the only way to get, to go through. I agree with you that we've done quite a lot of progress. The thing is that 20 years ago, when I first started with the Safe Spaces project that I talked about earlier, I couldn't go into a school before talking to the teachers and showing them my presentation. So they needed to see what I was going to talk about to their students. And today, I can do presentations to kindergarten. So we've there's a lot of progress, but there's a lot of things that we need to do still. And I don't know if you want to talk about it, Jace, but we did. You organized the first trans march this
So
year.
that was
That's a
actually
big
I don't
thing.
know, like other cities have this, and it was ours. It was our first one this year because we were a little bit late. But it was our first trans march, and it was awesome. Like it was our theme was healthcare because, like I mentioned previously, healthcare needs to be better. And yeah, so that was our theme this year, and it was a trans march, it was basically a protest. Unfortunately, it was raining, and we were supposed to get that huge storm, so we weren't able to do our trail that we wanted to do. But it was still we got the media attention that we were looking for, and it was really good. Hopefully, it gets some discussions going.
Um, so before we wrap it up, I have a couple of questions. So first of all, we thank you very much because we learned so much tonight, and we also learned some of the questions we should not ask. Eh, well, I felt the scolding. Did you? Yeah, that's okay. Um, any questions we did not ask that you would have liked us to ask? Nope. Crickets. All right. So, Jace, and same for you, France. Any advice for anyone going through anything similar to what you've gone through? And again, I want to acknowledge how, and it's unfortunate to say that, but how lucky and fortunate you are to have the parents and the support that you had, because I know from your parents and from reading that there's a lot of people who are not as fortunate, and it's hell, and it ends up in suicide or really tragic. So, any advice, any guidance that you want to give? So, I guess that's what you do when you go do your presentations in school. So, give us a little summary of that.
The guidance that I always give was the best advice I've ever received, and it was from that awesome social worker that we mentioned of. But it was when I was questioning myself and when I was thinking about like being trans, I was kind of showing some doubts. Is that when you feel like you are ready to come out, do it. Don't hesitate. Do it because like as long as you feel safe, like you're not going to get kicked out. Do it because it's the best thing that you'll ever like. Once you get that weight off your chest or off your shoulders, you sorry, you feel so much different though because like it feels so good to finally be your authentic self, you know?
I can't top that. That's exactly what I was going to say because of the awesome social worker that you've met. But that's exactly be yourself, and you're the one that knows exactly how fast or how slow you're supposed to go. Not your parents, not the social worker, not everybody else. It's yourself. You know yourself better than anybody else.
Thank you. Great. So to wrap up, we always do kind of end on a fun note kind of thing. So we ask one. We have questions that are pre-written, and we ask our guests every time. And so I'll ask. Actually, let's change it around. I'm gonna ask Jace the question, and you can ask France. Okay. So I'm gonna ask Jace. Pick a question 1 to 3.
2.
2. They always pick 2. I don't know why, but anyway.
'Cause you didn't-
Describe humanity 50 years from now. In your whatever it can be in the trans community, it can be science, it can be whatever you want. But describe your vision of humanity in 50 years from now.
Well, hopefully we get this climate thing under control. Sorry, it's the big talk right now. But no, 50 years from now, I see us, hopefully, if we, being hopefully like inclusive with all genders and people being happy. And I'd also like to see like those self-driving cars, or
do
maybe
I.
like yeah, I don't know. I feel like that'd be pretty cool. Like yeah, us having all one of those, instead of like your typical like Honda Civic,
Yeah, because you'll only be 70
Yeah.
at
Oh
that
my
time.
gosh, that's a long time.
Jeez,
from
so
now.
you'll be right in the prime there of your life.
I'll be rich.
Yes.
7-year-old.
We'll probably live till 120 by then, so you'll still have 50 years to go. France, 1, 2, or 3?
1.
1. If you could pick one country to live other than Canada, where would it be?
Anywhere warm.
And
So maybe that one. Maybe I'll say Cuba.
Cuba.
Mhm.
Okay.
I,
Just
cou-
heard.
I could work a little bit there too.
Oh, I'm sure you could find work there.
Oh yeah, I'm
Yes.
sure.
Yeah. All
Well,
right.
at least I'll be warm.
Yes. Well, listen, thank you so much. We've been trying to get this together for quite some time now, so I really appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, hopefully, I feel smarter. It's a good thing it's nighttime. I can go to bed now and learn something today. So, what about you, Fern?
I'm good. Yes, that was awesome. I mean, thank you both for coming, and
Thank you for having us. It's
hopefully we can we might have this conversation again at some point. We're not opposed to having return guests. All right, so thank you.
Yes.
Alain,
Yeah.
again, been a pleasure.
See you next time.
Thanks. Well, I hope you enjoyed our conversation. If you did, you could do us a big favor and share with your friends or rate us wherever you listen to this podcast. Our goal is truly to highlight the Maritimes, and we can only do this with your help. If you didn't like our conversation, well, what's the matter with you? Nah, just kidding. Our motto is one day better. That means we always want to be one day better than we were yesterday. So leave us a comment on Facebook and tell us how we can be better. We'd appreciate it, and we might even read your comment on our next podcast. Thanks for listening, and remember, look at everyone like they have something to teach you. See you next time.